Derek, what's with the spotlight?
For light.
Amy just said it's really bright.
Is it
super
bright?
intense, yeah, it's, well, yeah, or whatever.
You're looking crazy.
Now it seems very quiet. Okay.
You can be louder.
Little mood music, okay. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you. It's our first round of New York book clubs, and strange, right?
I was actually thinking that earlier, that it's really weird that we've
Been everywhere but New York.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming to the office, and yeah, you guys should just keep coming to the office more often. This is really easy. So what we're gonna do tonight is, this is Sarah, and Sarah is our head of brand styling, and we're gonna do a little Q&A about the Creative Pragmatist one. And in the back there, just so you know who the whole team is, it's, a lot of you guys see on IG Live, this is Matt,
Hi,
our
guys.
head of social media on his knees there. Derek, our film director, Byron, our art director, Katura, our, I don't know, maybe our I'm sorry. Just super stylist, right? Like, okay. Brittany, marketing, and Stella, marketing. She's the one who actually, Stella actually made the book, so. Everything, and then Jen and Patrick, who you guys might be familiar with from the TV store, and our head stylist there. So welcome, and thank you for coming. So we'll jump right into this. We'll do a little Q&A, and she's gonna ask me some questions, and then afterwards, I would really love it if you guys ask me questions. Feel free to do it here. A lot of times people leave, and then I get this flood of DMs afterwards, but it would be really nice if you have any questions to say them out loud too, because I always find that the questions that you guys have are ones that tons of other people have as well.
So Amy, why did you write a book on personal style? A lot of designers, they write biographies or they create books based on their collections over the years, but this is something a little bit different. You really went about fundamentally discovering your personal style. Why? Why? I mean, you know, 27 years old, that's why.
Yeah, you know, an interesting thing happened over COVID, right? Like a lot of us were at home and we were doing things. If you had a business, you were doing things to stay in business. And for me, one of the things that I started doing was getting on Instagram and talking a lot about style. And the more I talked, the more unanswered questions I had about style, and the more it made me think about how many other people probably question their own style as well. And I had a chance to really think about why that is. What, you know, as a designer, after 25 years in business, you would certainly think that I would have had that figured out, right? And what I realized talking to so many people online, individually, through all these DMs, is that people were really confused about their personal style. And I always hated the notion that style was something that you were either born with or not. And you know, growing up from Georgia, moving to New York, marrying a European, I think that was something that like I always held as like such a mystery, right? Like Europeans are just supposed to like wake up in the morning and then they've just got this magical style about them, and so that they're born with it. And me being from Georgia, I'm not born with it. But I thought, you know, there has to be something that you can learn here. Style has to be able to be learned, because if you really equate style with personal style, then I don't think people right out of the womb know who they are as an individual. And if personal style is really about showing who you are as an individual, how can you really have personal style if you don't know who you are as an individual? And as I started doing these Instagram stories and having these conversations, it got really muddy between myself and Tibby, the company, my own style. And I started the approach really thinking about how can I make sure that Tibby has a real identifiable style. And through that, I realized that I was missing a really identifiable style. That there were so many times that I got it right, and then there were lots of times where I didn't get it right, and I couldn't really figure out what were the common patterns between when I nailed it and when I didn't nail it. And I thought back even in my life, there were times where I would look back at pictures and something was really right, and then later on I'd look at pictures and I was like, what the hell, where did that come from? And so I thought there's gotta be a way to unpack this for people, help people understand what it is that they want to communicate about themselves first. And then once you know what it is that you want to communicate about yourself, then what are the tools that we can give you that I could think of to help you show that? And that's what that book was meant to do, to really help people figure out who they are, how they want to show up in the world, and then have the tools in order to execute on that.
Great. So the book is The Creative Pragmatist, but what is creative pragmatism? And yes, we know it is creativity means pragmatism, but could you break that down a little bit more?
Yeah, the term creative pragmatism came because first as a company owner, I was always frustrated. I would be at the back of a design, after a runway show, or maybe I would even have a buyer in from, Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf's, wherever, and they would ask me to describe my brand and describe my style. And once I got to like the third or the fourth word to describe it, they were like, whoa, check back in when you know who you are, right? Like, they were like, you can't be all these things at once. Like, are you a sexy brand? Are you a bohemian brand? What are you? And I just thought, well, it was just so frustrating because I'm a little bit of that and a little bit of that and none of that and some more of that. And I realized that I needed to give a label to my style, so that I initially approached it as a label to my style so that Neiman Marcus would finally understand what Tibby's about. And what I realized is giving a label to my style helped me figure out very much what I'm about. And I called it creative pragmatism. And I wanted to give a label that was broad enough that it would give me room to maneuver around. I would never feel locked in. I hated feeling locked into something. But it would also give me boundaries in which to operate. And I really thought, I'm a really creative person, but I'm also really pragmatic at the end of the day. And so as long as everything I do is couched in creativity and in functionality and in pragmatism, then that would help describe my style. And I could leave it at that. I no longer had to say I was sexy, but not, or bohemian, but not.
Right. So the beginning of the book really discusses adjectives and, the process to finding out what your adjectives are was the longer one. Why do you think that, understanding your adjectives is really important before diving into the rest of the book and really those key concepts and principles?
Well, I think that, above everything else, personal style is personal. It has to reflect who you are as an individual. The problem is that's really hard to reflect if you can't describe yourself, if you can't say it. If you can't say it, you can't visualize it. You can visualize it sometimes, but you can't visualize it consistently. And I love I'm reading Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Way, and he kind of talks about one of the key things about being an artist and being a creative is it's not about good or bad art. You can't look at Picasso or Basquiat or anyone, objectively and say that is good or that is bad. It really is about how much did that artist believe in what they were putting forth and how consistent were they and putting forth a message that really accurately portrayed who they are. And when you really put forth a message that accurately portrays who you are, it actually creates its own boundaries. You know, we are just one person, right? So if you keep drilling into who you are and putting that out there, you tend to not look all over the place, and you tend to not look the same either, because people are individuals and they're quite deep and complicated. So what I wanted to do with this notion of adjectives is really force myself and then force people to think about, how would you describe yourself? And I got really big in these debates back and forth in DMs and everything on really being quite insistent that you use adjectives to describe yourself. Because, you know, nouns, those are like people, places, things. You know, people would come to me sometimes and they're like, I'm, you know, a Mustang and I'm 60s and I'm Audrey Hepburn. And I was like, okay, that makes no sense to me at all. Like, I don't know how to apply that in real life. But adjectives are really good because they really, they're very descriptive. They describe nouns, and we are nouns, we are the people. And when you choose 3 of them, it really forces you to focus. 3 is a really magical number that way. Like, it is like the perfect balance. It forces you to focus. When you get 4, it's too many. 2 is too little. 3 is a really great number to use. You'll find you use it all the time in life. If you look at things, you'll see it all around you. Ready, set, go. You know, everything's usually presented in 3s. And so what I found when I was asking people, though, to come up with their adjectives, I came up with mine as chill, modern, and classic. And as we were asking people to come up with their adjectives, I noticed that people would write to me and they're like, well, I'm really searching for my adjectives, and mine are, you know, effortless, progressive, and heritage. You know, I was always like, that's synonyms for chill, modern, and classic. Like, everything still kept coming back to chill, modern, and classic. And when I started this, I thought like everyone would have like these different adjectives, but they weren't different. Like, people were really pushing, like people were like trying to come up with anything other than using the words chill, modern, and classic, because everyone in my Instagram, like, there are these pretty fierce, independent individuals. But what I realized is, amongst this group of people who are creative and pragmatic, it made sense that we were all intersecting at these 3 words, chill, modern, and classic. And I remember I was even checking in with the team at the store, and I was asking Patrick, and I was like, describe like the best, most fun people that you work with that come in. He's like, oh yeah, they always come in with like such an ease, and they're really open-minded, and they love craftsmanship and heritage. And I'm like, chill, modern, and classic. Like, this is very consistent. And when I would just, you know, ask them to describe his worst customers, you know, they came in, they were really uptight, and they wanted to know, like, what is the latest trend? And, you know, I don't give a shit about the history of that. Just give it to me if it's pink. And, you know, and so people who had really different adjectives weren't really people that we were talking to on a daily basis. So those adjectives became really important because they became like this focal point. We started using it all the time in our design. When Tracy and I started designing stuff, I was like, Tracy, everything that we've designed that we've ever loved stayed the test of time, that we've worn all the time, there's always something about it that is very chill and effortless, but there's modernity to it. And then there's a familiarity, a sense of classicness about it. And then things that didn't work for us, I was like, yeah, it was really modern, but like it was really uptight. And that didn't work, you know, or it was like very classic, but it had no ease to it. But when everything was chill, modern, and classic in one, I found that really like spoke to the root of who we were, and best showed our personal style.
Totally, and I think, you know, that did really evolve from creating a look where each piece was one of those adjectives, and then I think, you know, kind of the aha moment was realizing that every individual piece kind of needed those 3 elements together.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, how did you come about modifiers, and how does that really play a role into the adjectives?
Well, modifiers came about because, and all of this, by the way, like this was a process, this all started during COVID and then it just kept growing and growing. But the modifiers came about when, Tracy and I would be designing and she's like, well, but your style, the way you show things is very different than the way I show things. So like maybe we don't have the same adjectives. And Sarah's style, the way she shows things is very different. And I was like, yeah, but we've all intersected chill, modern, and classic. But it's this idea then that maybe we, in our own way, have these words that modify our adjectives. And that is really what is then that extra thing that tells that extraness about us that is always there and really differentiates us from each other. And I was thinking how for me, no matter when I'm getting dressed, it's always chill, modern, and classic, but I always want things to have a lightness to it, a bit of humor. I always want to put people at ease a bit with humor and keep it light. That's always been really important to me, and I think that no matter what I'm wearing, there's always something in my clothing that reflects that. And when it doesn't, I don't feel like I'm really showing my full personality in the way I'm getting dressed. And I know, Sarah, she's skis down Black Mogul, she's a big risk taker. And I think it shows in the way that she gets dressed, it's still chillin', it's modern and it's classic, but things are still really pushed. And, she and I are not clones of each other by any set. And Tracy's the same way, our head of design. She is a hardcore minimalist, her modifier is actually always stripping things back more and more. And so, I think what we found is that through clothing, we found a real way to constantly be showing who we are, so that no matter what we're doing in our life, we're always showing up as ourselves. And it has really freed us from this notion of, being all these different things, someone for work, someone for evening, someone for the weekend. How do you, if you read magazines, the idea of dressing up at the grocery store, first of all, it was even called like dressing up at the grocery store, and you were supposed to wear like sequins in the vegetable aisle just on a whim. And you were like, well, I don't want to wear sequins in the vegetable aisle, but then like I also don't want to look like I'm just hanging out in the vegetable aisle, but I want to look like myself, but then I don't want people to ask me like, why am I so dressed up? Or like you just want to be. And you just want to have personal style, and you just want to reflect who you are. And what I found through these DMs is this group of people who DM from all over the world have the most diverse and interesting range of jobs, from neurologists to farmers in New Zealand to dentists in Switzerland. Like everyone's got these different jobs, and no matter where they are in their lives and what they're doing or what age, they're anxious to like have a strong through line of their core personality. They're tired of having these hits and misses all the time. And that's what I wanted that book to do, is really not give you outfits to wear, but to give you a toolbox that you could constantly go into that would really help you convey who you are to yourself and to others around you.
So other than, finding your purpose in the produce section, what?
It's such an ass, yeah.
I want you to lean into that a little bit more. Like, what is the one thing that you really want people to take away from this book?
I want you all to approach getting dressed with so much more ease. I want, when I, 3 years into this now, I get so many DMs from people who say things like, finding out who you are and how to show that visually has been the most liberating thing that has happened to them. And it sounds like so guru-ish to say that. Like, it's, you know, if I said that, if I could hear myself saying this 3 years ago, I've been like, shut up, you sound ridiculous, like, it's style. But the thing is, you know, you've got 3 ways to communicate, and it's through your words, your actions, and your visuals. And if your visuals are really off, if they are talking smack about you, if they are telling people a different story than who you are, that's really, really frustrating. And it is so relieving for people to go into their closet and have the tools every day to get dressed in a way that communicates exactly the way that they want to communicate. It's, you know, if you're a daughter, it gives you the tools to get dressed and be able to explain to your mom why you love what you're wearing and why it makes sense, and do it with confidence and not have to think twice about it. If you've got a spouse who thinks certain ways about things, it really relieves you of the fear of judgment from friends, family, spouses, when you are just really able to visually show who you are. It's hard for people to pass judgment on that. It's almost, when you're showing who you are, it's almost like if you're tasting food and you're enjoying the food and someone tells you that what you're tasting isn't as enjoyable as you think it is. Like, how would they know? It's your food, you're tasting it, you know? It's, when you're showing your personal style, it's impossible to judge it because it's who you are. You know, you're really showing up in a way that is, it's different, but it's okay. And seeing the amount of DMs of people who are relieved from not having to think about clothing anymore in terms of if it makes their stomach look smaller, if it makes them look taller, if it makes them look like they have a bigger bust or a smaller bust, but really just thinking in terms of how are they gonna show up as themselves has been just so liberating for people. And I'm just so glad that people have had the tools now to put that into use. It's been really, really exciting.
So the book really lays out, you know, the core tenets of creative pragmatism. I know that sounds like an ideology. We're not a cult, I promise. But you know, we talk a lot about how these principles are more so guidelines than rules. And how do you go about addressing that, especially with customers that either very strictly follow them or, you know, kind of make up their own? How do you really want people to navigate their personal style with the principles that you've laid out?
Well, I think my goal with the book was, you know, get you to understand your adjectives, really think about the modifiers, and then give you some real life examples that I've experienced for when I was not showing my personal style in the best way. And by doing that, it kind of turned into this set of principles where I just had these aha moments, like, oh, you know, I talk about like one ton or none in the book. And the idea with one ton or none is that when your eye goes to just one place on the body, it seems to be very calming. It really is a soothing thing. And I can't explain why, but it's soothing. And so, you know, if you are wearing all shades of neutral and then you've got like a bright white, my eye's going to just one place. There's something very soothing about it. But it's interesting, I noticed, like if you're wearing a white shoe and a white top, I don't know where for my eye to look. It's kind of bouncing up and down, and it's at that little bit of unsettling moment that you have. And that little bit of unsettling is one that when you remove that, people are like, damn, these are things that like bothered me. I had no idea when I was getting dressed that was like the itch that was like really, really getting at me. And you know, with ton, it's like the idea that you can wear so many different things, all these different colors. Like I always use like maybe Leandra Medine or someone as an example, who can have, you know, 5 different patterns and shapes and colors on her. And your eye just lands in one place, because it's not going to just maybe the pink jacket, the yellow shirt, the green pant, the red shoe, the turquoise bag, you know, it's just landing in one place. So it's about really creating like comfort and balance. And it's a rule that some people write to me and they're like, aha, I have on white shoes today and a white shirt and it looks great. And I'm like, that's great, like that is so great, like it's gonna happen for you, and that's perfect when that does. But what you will find is the rules are there more often for when you don't feel great. They're usually the answer. They're usually gonna help you like fix something in your closet rather than be like the list that you should have to follow every single day.
Totally, and you know, talking about rules, and you briefly mentioned this, but the color wheel gets brought up a lot more often now that it's tangible and physical.
Thank you, Matt. Yes.
Can you show people how that works? And again, it's really about, you know, more navigation and guidelines than very stringent rules.
Yeah, the color wheel I did because, again, like really trying to figure out when was it that I felt my best stylistically. And you know, guys, like for 27 years, this is kind of all I've thought about, being Tibby. And then for my entire life, I always thought about style, but not in a way that was probably as productive as it should have been. But what really helped when I did this color wheel was figuring out that when you have colors that get further and further apart on the wheel, or when they get closer and closer, it gives you a different feeling when you put your clothing on. And I realized that getting dressed is all about creating a feeling. And it's been a real game changer just at the store, and how we talk when we're trying on prototypes here is really understanding how do we feel and stuff. The whole notion of saying how we look in things it's become such a, it's like not dated for the sake of dated, it's just absolutely inaccurate to like think now in terms of how we look. It's how do things make us feel. And so when you understand how colors work together, colors can make you feel a very certain way. Like you're wearing the white and the green and the black, right? And those colors are far apart on the color wheel. And when you wear things further apart on the color wheel, you've got further contrast, and you tend to usually feel in a way that is a little more sharper and in focus. Like when we're designing, when we're styling out and we're using colors very sharp like that, your colors are very sharp with your black and your white and your brown. You know, you'll notice maybe that day you're feeling a little more structured. Like if I've got a lot of shit to do, maybe like, you know, that's where I really lean into that. It helps me focus. But then I noticed that like if I'm pairing up neutrals with colors in this second ring and this third ring, it's a softer vibe, you know, it's more, it's a little more zen-like. And then sometimes when I'll do this, I'm like, this is way too fucking zen. Like I've got an important meeting to do in the office, like I feel too zen-like. And so then I'll reach for like a strong color here or one of the stronger colors here to help like bring it back a bit, you know? And then these colors at the ring 3, when you mix them with like these bright colors here on the end, they calm everything down. So what I would find when people would write to me, especially with like, I've got a closet jammed full of clothing and nothing to wear, they were usually people who had bought into all this black and the neutrals, and then someone told them like, oh, you've got so much black and neutrals, like you need some color in your closet. And so then they were skipping this ring, jumping out here, and that's fine. But what they didn't realize is even when they bought like 7 items out here, and then they had all this, everything in their closet still felt the same when they put it on. They had different outfits, but everything still felt the same. And you know that when you get dressed in the morning, one morning versus the next, the morning versus the night, you're not really thinking about different outfits that you're wanting to put on. It's usually different feelings that you're wanting to put on. So if you've replicated the same feeling over and over in your closet, then you inevitably do feel like you have a closet of all the same things. So really figuring out how to make sure that you've got like range within this color wheel and how these colors are making you feel has been a real game changer for a lot of people. You know, it really like, it just allows you to figure out like how to wear colors together in a way. And when if you do also, if you're one of those types that creates a Pinterest board or anything like that of people's style that you like, just, you know, you think that they're all like in something basic, but then when you look closer, usually the t-shirt's a weird taupey color, the shoe's a weird dark brown. There's usually some weird, interesting colors there that have given more depth than maybe what you noticed at first glance when you're like, oh, I can do that, you know, it's just a black and white outfit or whatever.
Totally. So I know the question that I want to end on, but before I do, does anyone have any questions about the book or anything in general about Tibby or Amy?
No. Yeah.
This is maybe more of a personal question for you,
Yeah.
Amy, but we were just talking about dressing for how you feel.
Yeah.
Do you try to dress for how you want to feel in the morning or for the day, or do you tend to try to align to express like how you're feeling when you wake up in the morning?
I definitely dress for the way that I want to feel. You know, like there are way too many mornings where I'm tired and I don't feel very creative. You know, I want to be more than how I feel early in the morning for sure. So I dress for the way that I want to feel. And I also, you know, one of the things I found, like when people were asked to do their modifiers and when people were asked to describe themselves, one of the things I found was a lot of people are very hesitant to admit to me or to themselves the things that how they want to feel, how they want to be, especially when it comes to creativity. A lot of people are very reticent to call themselves a creative, and I think that, you know, I find that most of the people that are probably in this room and that we work with, you want to feel creative, you know, and I think that's something that, like, when you go into a store, if you ever work with like a regular salesperson in a store, that's not something that you would usually think to say to a salesperson, and it's not something that a salesperson would think to say to you. You know, they're like, oh, I've got you something that's gonna make your waist look tiny or whatever, you know, but not something that's gonna make you feel like a really creative individual. So creativity to me is one of the most important things for me to feel when I'm getting dressed. And I know that is also, just by the way, it's such a universal thing. Like, it really transcends age, it transcends gender, race, everything. Like, everyone at any age wants to really feel creative, because I think to be creative is to feel like you're really part of the world and what's happening around you. And I think that's why I get a lot of DMs from some people who, you know, someone who might, well, Couture, you were working with that woman who, was it like her 70th, 80th?
Yeah.
80th?
In Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met like midnight, but she wanted to look creative
Yeah.
for her 80th birthday party, and she wore a draped dress with socks and sandals, and it was the most beautiful thing.
Yeah, and so I think to feel creative is just to feel very present and interesting. So, yeah, but it's really, but it's hard to do if you don't understand the role that the items that are in your closet play. And because we had a really good question at the earlier session, and it was around a woman who was asking about what type of handbag to buy, and it got into a whole conversation about how, you know, the way of thinking about style in the past was, you know, you were supposed to think about, like, do a board of your favorite outfits and when you looked your best. And then they would tell you, go buy more of those favorite outfits. And then you just had more of the same in your closet. And, you know, instead of really looking at like a board and saying, these are my favorite outfits and they worked for these reasons. So good, you're done. Like you've got those. So now like how do you build that out? And what other things do you put into that tool chest to help you tell your story instead of getting so repetitive all the time? Yeah.
I want to start with a thank you, which is one of the things I was most excited about tonight was to meet other people who are obviously have the same ideas that you're kind of putting forth. And also, you know, I'm one of those people that I found to be a year ago. And up until then, I had a closet that I hated, like filled with stuff that I didn't wear, sending to the real, buying more, never feeling like myself, but not understanding why. And I think the beauty of what you're doing is giving people language. Because you say these things and we're all here going, yes, but I could never articulate that before and now I can. So my question is, like, you've also talked about, I know, like your past, you know, both in advertising and American Express, and I'm wondering how, like, your past has informed your present.
It has, but it's funny because I've actually had to undo a lot of it in order to do what I'm doing now. And, you know, I felt like the way that I learned things in the past with focus groups and everything was so at an arm's length. And to be honest, I know that there's no way that this could have happened without all of this interaction through DMs. And it's this concept of creative pragmatism has attracted the most interesting group of people, like literally on the planet. I just can't believe when we've been doing these tours in Milan and Vienna and Vancouver, everywhere, like people are so interesting, like really thoughtful, interesting people, and like really brilliant people. And they're writing me these DMs and they're giving me their brilliant thoughts, and then I'm like thinking about it and responding to it. And so through that, it's created like this whole like process in my head where then it keeps getting distilled down into this vocabulary that is bringing all these people together with this like common way of speaking to each other. But even in our business for 25 years, like my head of design and I, like we used to get into like it would be stressful. Like you would get into some fights that over clothing design because the words that you had to describe something were, I don't like it, it just feels off. This pleat doesn't feel right, it's too long, it's not what I'm in the mood for. And like when Tracy and I were trying to design something, and those were like the words that we could use, then like inevitably it would end with Tracy saying, I don't feel like you really respect my creativity. And I would be like, well, I don't feel like you really respect my style. And then we'd be at loggerheads. And now it's crazy. Like we can talk to each other in a way that it's not like going to school and learning like, okay, use your nice words. It's not about nice words. It's about learning how to communicate in a way that is actually productive and telling a story that people understand. And so now when Tracy brings me something, if I don't like it, I'm able to say things like, it feels too modern and I don't have the ease in it that I want. And if we just like, let's give it some more ease. I don't feel balanced in it, you know, and maybe last season, maybe we went a little pushed on the modernity side and I've got a lot of strength in my closet. And now I'm craving for things that are gonna be a little softer feeling. You know, I think we need some softer colors in the line now, and it's gonna ease up on some of the harsher jackets that we did last season that we were so in the mood for. And then when you talk that way to Tracy, I'm not saying the jackets for last year suck now, you know, because that's not what I'm saying. And when I'm saying that I want things to be softer, I'm not saying I hate that harsher skirt that you did. Like, we're communicating in a way that is so productive. And so Tracy and I are talking that way, but now, like, I'll be in the store and I'll hear someone talking to Jen or to Patrick, and they're saying things like that. They're saying, you know, well, last season I bought a lot of brown and it was very relaxed, and I think I'm craving like maybe something a little tougher to mix in with that. Like, that is so much more productive than someone coming in and telling Patrick, I just need something, you know, like that's it, you know, then you get something and then it's just like, you know, someone's like, well, this is on trend, okay, well then I'll try it. So, yeah, everyone's like very, so focused to a way that I had coffee with a woman last week, and she is designing stuff, and she was showing me some of the designs that she was working on, and I was like, I said, I need you to understand right now that like 5 of the things that you've just shown me are very close to what's in our fall, in our new spring 24 collection that'll come out in September. And I need you to know that so that you know that I have not taken your ideas today. And she was like, but that's crazy, how could that be? And I was like, because you are showing me, like, you've been wearing Tibby like solidly for the last 2.5 years. You're starting to crave the same things at the same time that we're craving. You know, if you've had a closet that has been filled with kind of necklines like this or this kind of ease, then you're craving something a little more geometric. Are you craving something with a little more shine or strength in the fabrication? So, you know, it's really, like, this is like not artificial intelligence, it's like actual intelligence feeding on of each other, but we're all starting to crave the same things at the same time because we're all speaking this common language. You know, it's weird that way. Like, it's just gonna get weirder. I promise, warning. And not because we're spying on you through AI or anything like that. I promise. Yeah.
I had a question about pragmatism.
Mm-hmm.
So especially living in New York, like maybe a lot of people here, so much of what goes into my decision about what to wear is like, is it raining? How much time do I have to spend on the grody streets?
Yeah.
How much am I running around like 3 different boroughs today? So how does that kind of like weather, like where I'm going, how does that level of extreme pragmatism influence both the way that you dress and then also how you think about when you're designing a collection?
I think that I think that what I love about extreme pragmatism is when you really lean into it, it actually gives you permission to be so unbelievably creative because you have a rationale for it. You know, like if it's really raining out and I don't want the bottom of my pants to get wet, it forces you, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like, it forces you to, I mean, you should do something creative to get your pants off the ground. And it might mean that you tuck them into your socks, or that you do tie them up with a hairband that you have on the spot. It might mean that if you have a grocery bag with you, that you tie it around you in a weird way to keep something dry. And if you do look at street style, if you look at really creative people, their creativity has come from figuring out something that was really functional. And when someone has creativity that has no function, no necessity at all, I find it to be so basic and dull. You know, like, straddle in here. I think that's why, like, when I can rail against like super high, weird, platformy shoes in the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of the city, it's so inappropriate to me because it is so not pragmatic, you know, like, and that is so dull to me. So I think really leaning into it, someone, like the woman today that was asking about the bag and having a wealth of like, how can I build out these tools in my closet? We're like, you know, when you choose an item to carry your computer in or whatever, you're not having to choose the chic Balenciaga bag, or the chic Celine, whatever. Choose the tote bag that your child made you for his like kindergarten program, or that you got when you ran a race that you were really proud of and it was like your first marathon. Like these things that you carry that are functional and that have meaning, when you find that you can explain why you have something, why you're using it, it's amazing how it becomes like this superpower thing. You know, like Patrick is wearing this t-shirt today, and you know, he was explaining how this was one that he wore growing up with his grandparents all the time, and that it was like actually a nightgown when he was wearing it when he was like 3 years old. And you know, if Patrick were wearing an $800 Vêtements t-shirt that was worn to a shred with a bull on it, that would not be so much Patrick's vibe, you know, and you kind of feel a little self-conscious in it, like, you know, a little douchey walking around in this t-shirt, you know, I don't know. But it's like, it's your story that you know, it's a private thing. And sometimes you even like explaining it to someone, you know, yeah, like Patrick did to me today, not in a defensive way. But it does give you this like superpower thing to do stuff. So yeah, when it was raining the other day, you've made me like those little, like the
You hate
Bottega. I hated them. I hated those little Bottega puddle boots on a beautiful sunny day and like super short shorts walking around Milan in them, but like, damn, like wearing them and not that you were wearing them.
I was like, when did I
So you never, but like every time it rains and you
They're
pull out
functional.
they're functional, exactly. And I have pragmatism FOMO when I see that. So yeah, when things are really functional, they went out, and that's where a lot of brands really get that right too. You know, you can, you know, a brand like Balenciaga to some may seem like, oh, that's crazy that it's XYZ amount for that rubber woven bag or whatever, but there's a lot of items that you're like, you get a lot of cost per wear out of it because there's a real interesting functionality there. You know, Margiela, same way, a really interesting functionality. Yeah, and when we're designing, I do, you know, when I talk about, remember that it's without fails, in and outs, and had to haves, and it goes like that. The pyramid goes up, your without fails are your structure. When we're designing, a without fail has to pass so many tests to earn that label. Like, to be a fundamental in your closet, it needs to be able to go play dinner work. It needs to really try and be at least 12 months out of the year, unless maybe you live in Bali. It really, you know, it should be able to help you formulate big, slim skin in your closet. It should be able to have texture in some way and give depth. So it should be able to be manipulated. You know, you should be able to make it longer, shorter, push sleeves up, whatever. So when you ask, like, how the considerations come in when we're designing for fundamentals, yeah, like if it's raining out, I should be able to do something with it to make it functional. If it's freezing out, I should be able to layer it up. If it's sweltering out, I should be able to unlayer it. So, yeah.
I think, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the word chill sort of becoming pretty loaded over time. It's a little bit controversial because it's just equated with so many different nuanced other words like effortlessness and just being really casual, very Alson Thoreau-esque.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost over time becoming like the antithesis of getting dressed up. And
Mhm.
to a lot of people, they don't feel like they can pull off Mary Olsen oversized everything
Yeah.
look, and to them, they want to infuse a little bit of chill in their wardrobe, but they also want to get dressed up. But
Yeah.
if they get dressed up, they feel too dressed up.
Yeah.
So it's becoming a little controversial over time. So do you ever feel like maybe you need to expand more on like, what do you mean by chill?
Well, I think the book does, because none of these things reside on their own. You know, everything is chill, modern, and classic. And so, you know, if I were just to describe myself as chill, well, then you would think that I could like drive up the coast of California and just wardrobe myself all day and night, but I never could. You know, the necklines were always too stretched out for me. Things were too droopy. Things, you know, like, and it wasn't just about grabbing an Aviator Nation sweatpant and pairing it with like a structured blazer and being like modern and chill. Like, it just didn't work for me, you know? And it was too like bifurcated or trifurcated, especially if I had on like a strict like classic shirt and then the chill sweatpant from Aviator Nation and then the modern jacket. So for me, like when we did the Calder sweatpant, all in one, it is the effortlessness of the physicality. It's a sweatpant, you know, like it is sweatshirting fabric, but it's very modern, you know, the shaping on it, the flat band here, like it's definitely got a sense of modernity about it. And then it is a sweatpant, like it's very classic at the same time too. So to me, it really like, one can't exist without the other. And that's okay, because it's complication made really simple. And so yeah, I really rarely say, oh, this whole look is chill. If I did, it would be, you know, if Tracy gave me something, I'd be like, it's so chill. I'm craving some modernity and something a little more classic about it. And I think that our adjectives triangulated in everything we do is what, you know, keeps, you know, like you talk about modifiers, it keeps Tibby from not looking like the row, and it doesn't look like, you know, so a brand like Nilly is much more refined and more, a little more ladylike in a different way, you know, like it might be the same idea from a layman, from a point of view, but in reality, it's quite different.
I wanted to ask, why do you think more designers are not taking the opportunity to speak directly to their clientele the way that you're doing? Because there's been many times where I've watched a live and you guys showed an item and styled it, and I was like, oh, now I like it, but originally I didn't trust myself. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, you know, there are things that, we're in a really unique position because Tibby is privately owned. I am Tibby. We have a team that has been with us for a very long time, and we can do whatever we want. So, you know, I think that the idea of a designer at a bigger place coming out and being in front of the camera, like, why would they? You know, like I had to do it during COVID because we were not going to be in business if I didn't. Like, I had to. The thing is once I did it, like, I really loved it. And I discovered for me that, you know, I didn't realize before COVID how kind of soul-sucking sometimes the business was, you know. It was like I would go to events and people would come up to me and they're like, oh my God, I wore this dress of yours and I looked so good in it. And I'm like, wow, that warms my heart. And then I would just think I could give a rat's ass. Like, really, like, I just didn't care at all. I didn't care. I mean, like, I did, but I didn't. And so what I found though is for me to start talking to people and then having people talk back, and then when they started telling me these stories and how just situation after situation in these DMs, and it's funny because Stella back there is working on another project with us, and I'll walk by her and she's been reading these DMs that go back now for close to 3 years, and every time I walk by she's like, I love my job, this makes me love my job, I love my job. And it really it's giving me so much meaning to have meaning to the clothing, and I think if other designers knew how much meaning they would get out of it, they would do it more. But I also think you have to be in a position like at Tibby where we are big enough to be able to have a company to be able to do this, but we are also small enough to be able to do this. And that is a sweet spot that not a lot of people are in. You know, young designer, brand new designer, they're back there cutting their own fabric right now, they're draping their patterns, like they sure as shit are not like, okay, I'm gonna now get on a live and answer a bunch of DMs. Like they can't, you know, and then
I think it's also like a comfort factor. I mean, we talk about for years, like no one knew not no one, but like who was behind Tibby and Amy until, you know, COVID. You didn't show your face in any of the photos that you took with the outfits and all of the things like that. And I don't really think everyone is comfortable sharing their full selves. Like that's why the business of influencers exists, and people are fascinated by it. Like voyeurism exists for that reason. But I think in other capacities, maybe not in the same extent that Amy does, but there are other designers who definitely speak to their audiences about different things that they care about. Paul Garang, Brandon Maxwell. But again, those are all small companies run in-house. So I think, you know, business plays into a lot of that.
yeah, and I think I mean, just also for me, I really I'm surprised now in hindsight I wasn't a philosophy major in college, because I love really thinking about the why behind all of this and figuring it out, and so I really, like, I love doing it. I love answering the DMs. I read all my DMs. I really just, I love doing it, and I can't believe how good it has been for our morale and the way that we think, and how helpful it's been from a design point of view. So it's just been very good for business too.
Do you have a memory of seeing a piece of clothing or an accessory of some sort that you just felt like deeply attracted to? I kind of think of the category of have-to-haves, but for one reason or another, you decided to ultimately part without purchasing it. I hear you talk about that a lot with like smart decision making while you're shopping, but I think of my modifier as dramatic or drama, and so I see a lot of those pieces where I'm like, I absolutely have to have this, but then it's still hard for me to articulate kind of why in my mind I ultimately decide to leave it, even though I've gotten better at it. And I'm just kind of curious if you've had experiences with that you recall.
Yeah, I mean, this was the shit that was really piling up in my closet, because I was always buying white lacy things, and I was buying them from Isabel Marant. I bought them even from Chanel at one point, tons of Chloe.
Your shitty kryptonite.
Yes.
I sent you a DM about this. The lacy dress.
Yes, you're the one. I mean, like, and Tracy and I, like, every time we were in Paris, she was like, don't do it, you're not going to wear it. And I just, I don't know who I thought I was in that, like, alter ego, and I never wore it. I didn't, and I never, like, every time I put it on, it was just such a friggin' letdown, because I never felt the way that I wanted to feel. And so what's funny is, like, I have those things packed up, and I have not thrown them away, but I am not buying anymore of them, even though there was this Bodhi one that I started like the other night, and I'm like, no, walk away, walk away. It was really good though, I'm gonna walk away. No, I'm not
We can
gonna do it.
unpack that
No,
later.
because you'll force me, no, you'll like, no, I'm gonna talk to Tracy about it. She'll tell me no. But the key is when you can isolate it and you understand why you're drawn to it and why you don't need it, it's really liberating. And I know, Katura and Sarah and I were in LA and we went to the Real Real, which in Beverly Hills is like the ultimate of all the Real Reals. And we were saying that for the three of us, that place should have been like landmines, you know, like all the things from runways past. And we were able to like treat it very museum-like, and we walked out, no purchases, and we just didn't need it. Like we had those things, those crazy elements that we had bought before. I had a Margiela beaded bustier. I didn't need it, and it felt so nice to, you know. And if one of them had played a real role in my closet, I would have gotten it, but they didn't, and I knew what role they were playing. So it's nice to go in and not walk into a store thinking, I'm on a budget, I'm not gonna do it, and I'm gonna be good to the environment, and I'm not gonna do it. Like, that's all good in theory, but it's really hard, you know? It's much easier if you can walk in and just so viscerally know that, like, you know, I don't need it, I don't need it. And the thing, it's not like I didn't buy anything, because then we went to Resurrection and they had that vintage, amazing, that men's three-piece suit, and I did buy that, like that was incredible. And I needed that, and it was like this really cool vest, but, and I'll wear it, that I needed, the other stuff I didn't need. So it's not about not buying anymore, but when you can categorize things and you know what size of space they're gonna occupy in your tool closet, chest, you're a lot more focused, and you do buy a lot less. That is overwhelmingly what I hear from people is people are buying so much less stuff, and it like I'm so happy for that. I really, really am. Even though like technically I probably shouldn't be, but I am. I am.
Nice one. You were just talking about how you answer all the DMs and you spend a lot of time thinking about the why behind things. So I'm just curious, what do your days look like? Because you do so much. I was talking to a couple of people here going, where does she find the time to do all this stuff?
Well, the literal day is I wake up around 5:30 in the morning, and I do look at DMs first at 5:30 in the morning, because that's when I get like a lot of European questions, and they're easy to answer, you know. And nothing, I mean, listen, like 80% of them are like heart. And then some of them are complicated, and I'll mark it as unread to go tackle on the train. But then I go down and get my coffee, and then I actually set up my iPad, and I usually start writing and doing, working on like what's a concept for the week for IG Live, what's concept for stories for the week, and I do that until about 7:30. I shower, I'm on the train by 8:30, and on the train for a solid hour, I get DMs answered. And then I come into the office, and everyone knows, like, when I'm in the office, it's just, I can tell people's feet behind me, like, who's walking behind me trying to catch me at different times. But it's lots of meetings and then popping back in and doing more DMs and content, and I don't know, I feel like I'm in constant motion, circling around
You are.
the office.
I mean, everyone's always looking for you.
Sometimes I'm hiding, but
Like, it's because you're always like with someone.
somewhere, yeah, I'm like constantly going around from department to department, and then I'm back on the train by 6 o'clock, and then dinner, and then hopefully I'm checking in with my dog and my husband and all of that, and then I start it over. It's kind of boring. To be honest, like, there's no, like, I read like Kelly Wearstler or Gwyneth Paltrow, and they always have like these fabulous green drinks, and yeah, like, I mean, I'll go to bar class like twice a week or whatever, but you can get so much exercise running for the train. It's just not played up enough, but you really can, especially like if you're always late. You had a question back.
I'm older than you, so I can ask this.
Go for it.
Have you found that you've changed, as you've gotten older, changed your approach, made any concessions?
I think that's where the philosophy comment comes in. I think I'm able to slow down and think about things a little bit more. Although it's kind of confusing in my mind because it's these DMs that I get from people who are coming from every walk of life, literally, is constantly this assurance that people have such different viewpoints and experiences, and so many different viewpoints and experiences, but also so much shared common ground. And so I really, that perspective is something that I feel so lucky to be privy to, because I think especially I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for anyone younger. I have sons who are 20 and 23, and they've grown up in a world of social media. They've grown up in a world where things are served up as for you, and I think that you can easily believe that there is so much absoluteness in the world, that there's so much right and then wrong. And I think that notion that things are either right or wrong can be so crippling to anyone at any age, and I think it's crippling in your personal style. I know that even for my son graduating from college, it was such a fear of, will I make the right decision or the wrong decision, and trying to let him know that, like, even though what he's being served up so much in the world is about this, not this, that the real world isn't like that, and that you can do this for a little while, and then you can decide to do something else, and then you can pivot to this if that doesn't work out. And so I think that it's funny, the connection that I've been making with clothing, that just even putting things on your body at the same time that seem so right and wrong and so in contrast with each other, like a Lacoste shirt and a striped business pant and a Western belt, like seeing how all of those different ideas are interesting on you at the same time, like forcing yourself to do that over and over again. What you find is that when you revert back to the Izod shirt with the khaki pant with the white sneaker, you're like, well, that's just not interesting. And then you start to make the connection that, well, that's not interesting, but then you kind of start to feel like, well, if my friends are all the khaki shirt, the Izod, and the white sneaker, that's not interesting either. Or if they're all, the Western belt or the exciting sequin shoe, like, it's fine, but over and over, and if it's the only thing, it's not interesting. And so you really start to seek out being around different people to excite you. And then when you're around different people, you start to realize that there are lots of different points of views out there, and how could one thing only be right and one thing only be wrong? And so therefore, if that's not the case, well then, if my son's deciding right now that he's going to be a chef, that is right for him right now, and it might be wrong for him later on, but there's just no absolutes, and so I feel privy in knowing that. I think it is interesting figuring out how it relates to clothing and how I'm seeing people relate it to clothing more and more, and even like wearing different textures, they're starting to be like, I'm wearing all these different textures and I'm getting it, that like all of this is creating depth and interest, and all of a sudden I'm craving this texture in my own life. And so I think that one of the most rewarding things out of all of this is it is so cool when people write to me and they're like, I'm getting together with other people that I've met, other creative pragmatists, and we're getting together in London, or we met up in Atlanta or wherever. And when I meet people and they're like, I feel like I've known you forever, is that weird? Like, and is that just because of Instagram? And I'm like, no, because you know, if I met like Nicole Kidman tomorrow, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, I feel like I've known you forever. Like, I wouldn't feel like that, right? But a lot of us, when we meet each other out in the wild, they have, you know, people like will meet up in a grocery store. My husband and I were in the Atlanta airport, and this woman came like flying into the train, and she was like, oh my God, Amy, and she was like, I live in Florida and I'm just flying through, and we talked on the train the whole way through, and my husband was like, does this happen a lot? Like, because the conversation wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting to meet you. Like, it went right into like an interesting conversation. It was not superficial. And so I know that a lot of you guys, you've met people your whole life through the people that were in the cubicle next to you, the people that were in your grade school, the people that you went to college with, the people that you had your first children with, the people that were your first neighbors. And what you realize is that a lot of these people were friends that you made through circumstances, during time, during different, you know, zip codes, income levels, careers, or whatever, but it didn't mean that you shared a common mindset with them. And, you know, this chill and modern and classic, while we use it as adjectives, it really does refer to people's mindsets. And I would say a lot of those friends early on that I have, like, a lot of them are not very chill, you know? And so I find that they're my friends they're my periphery friends, you know? I can do the cocktail party or whatever, but they're not the friends that when I sit down with, I'm like, where did the time go? It's 3 hours later, how did this happen? And so that's really cool that people are making really interesting friendships out of this. I'm seeing at these events, people are trading business cards with each other and everything, and that's like really amazing, you know?
You mentioned earlier talking about how when you're designing an upcoming collection, it can be in reaction to a previous collection.
Mm-hmm.
How is the fall collection a reaction to the spring collection?
I think in the fall collection, I was creating things with a little more structured and like heritage and workmanship.
I think it was also, you know, Amy and Tracy also designed based on, you know, what they're feeling in the world. And at that point, I think, you know, we're coming down to the wire on the book, which I think really solidified kind of the mindset idea of the brand, and like really created that rubric and structure. And I think I really think that played a lot into it, being able to, you know, put words to what you were thinking. And I mean, I've seen it in terms of flowing to future collections. I think you see it with like the colors or the shapes, and really like filling the voids in your closet from one season to the next, I think is really communicated.
Yeah, I think that, it works on, when we design, it's on a few different levels, because you're thinking like, what are the fabrics that I'm craving, what are the colors, and then what are the shapes, and how will it work with the things that I already own. And so for me, like Sarah was saying, we were so immersed in the book at the time, and so we all, in different circumstances, ended up watching the movie Giant with Elizabeth Taylor, and there was this scene where it starts out and she's in New England and she's wearing her riding habit, and it's a very New England riding habit, and she ends up moving to Texas, and it's still Elizabeth Taylor and it's still horses, but it's not at all this New England setting. And it was just interesting seeing the same person still being the same individual, but in such a different environment and interpreted then through the lens of a different landscape. And so that was something that, you know, I think about a lot in the book is, you know, how is it that all these people from all these different countries we're all in such different settings and ages in our lives and everything, and then we've got these common sets of principles and how we you know, think, and so that played up on one level, and then I think just the classicness in that movie played up in an interesting way. And I think for spring, you know, we played up a lot of this sheerness and the fluidity and this really softness in colors. And I think that made me kind of craving for things that were a little more true, like really true, obvious, classic inspired. And then, I don't know, that color palette came when you and I were walking on the Pont Neuf, and that it was this magazine stand with all these Mickey Mouse Club magazines from the 40s, and all of those weird neutral colors and those grays with those interesting pastels were just really interesting. So when we're designing, then it's like figuring out, like, okay, well, you know, what kind of interesting full shape is going to work with some of the slimmer silhouettes that we had in the earlier collections. And so yeah, it's just sort of like this continual build and build. And then we found ourselves in San Miguel filming the whole thing. It was so much fun. It was really good. It's a good collection. But I gotta get like focused on the next one that's gonna open in like a month and a half. What, I'm like, what season am I even in?
Talk about on Thursday.
I know, we have like that meeting, it's gonna be a big meeting. Yeah, spring 24th. It's gonna be good. You guys have any other questions? This side's been kind of silent, don't you?
Taking it all in.
Where do you draw your biggest sources of inspiration from? You mentioned film, but is there any other thing that you keep going back to and you're like, this is tried and true?
It's ourselves. It's really like, it's so coming from what we're craving and feeling. And so it's like, I'm, you know, Sarah inspires me every day. Katura, Patrick, Jen, everyone, like the whole team constantly inspires me. And I think that they do that because it's also rooted in chill, modern, and classic, but then just seeing different takes on things always like makes me think. So it's always that, but then there are always those trigger moments and you don't know when they'll happen. Like, you know, it really was watching the movie Giant, walking across the Pont Neuf and seeing that magazine stand. And so it's kind of like you have to be kind of calm and in the moment so that you can recognize it when it does happen. And you know, and sometimes it won't be like a breakthrough moment, like, because we should have bought the magazines.
Yeah.
When we were there, we took a picture of them, and then
Oh,
that
I
woman
yelled
said, like, she got so mad. But we should have just bought the magazine, but I'm glad you took the picture, because then it stayed with me. When something does kind of like make you scratch or itch, take a picture, like keep it in your phone. Take pictures of, you know, too, like when you try on clothing, take pictures of it, keep it in your phone. It's a good way to go back and like, see if your eyes change. That from a creative standpoint, your eye really does change. Mine changes all the time when Tracy brings me stuff. You know, I'll really kind of sometimes flat out reject it, and you know, Tracy every time she's like, take the picture, just take the picture. And I'm like, I don't wanna take the picture. She's like, take the damn picture, Amy. And, you know, usually like, sometimes 2 weeks later, sometimes 2 months later, and sometimes never. But my eye adjusts and I go back and I'm like, okay, there's something there. And so, you know, it's just being alert so that you know it when it happens.
I think it's also like an open communication in our office, and just those like really clear channels. And, you know, I think kind of that idea of a shared mindset, you know, Tracy might design something that Amy isn't feeling, and, you know, 2 weeks later, I haven't seen it, but I might be like, oh, I'm really like craving this, you know, satin wide leg cargo pant, and 2 hours later, Tracy comes over with the pant because she dug it out of a pile in the back.
I think, and this is kind of a good thing to end on, but, when I was talking earlier about the no right or wrong, and then the Rick Rubin thing about creativity, and it's just about having a point of view and getting really good at expressing that point of view. I think that, you know, if you can really, I find that when I feel the most stressed is when I do believe that there is just a right thing to send down the runway and then a wrong thing to send down the runway. And when you know that if it really is something that you are feeling, no matter what, that is the right thing. It doesn't mean that it's the perfect thing for everyone, but it's definitely something to like scratch and hone in on. And so that's given us so much permission here to not really stress so much about whether or not we're going to be right or wrong with what we do. It's more of my struggle at night is how can I really figure out the best way to communicate why I've chosen what I've chosen and make sure that I'm as clear as possible in that communication. And so that is why the marketing and the storytelling behind this has all become so important to me, not to like mask something shitty and make people fall in love with it. And it's more just because we really want to make sure that, you know, we're really giving it the best shot possible to explain why we've done something the way that we've done it. And I just, you know, just know that like as just with style, there is just no right or wrong. It is just like this experimentation, and the more that you really go that route, like especially, and I don't think that any of you guys would do this, but like, you know, if you have kids or anything, like it really, it releases so many people from like caring about what their kids wear or caring about what their spouse or their partner is wearing, you know, like it doesn't matter, like they're really just expressing themselves in their own way, and you really start to realize that, you know, and then you start to realize it's so sad if they don't express themselves in their own way, you know, and then that starts to permeate to everything that you do. And then it really starts to help you get that Teflon, so that if you do have that friend who really like offers up that advice, like, you know, I'm not trying to be rude, but I just want you to know, like, that does not look that good on you. Like,
I think you said that, like I saw that video. To like to soften
that's the
blow.
friend, you
Yeah.
know, but like, it just really allows you to just know that like that is so much about them and their problem. And they can be a really good friend and say that, and it doesn't matter, because that's their thing, that's all they know to do, that's how they think about style, and it has zero to do with you. It doesn't make them a bad person, it just means that they do not think the same way that you do at all about style, and that's okay, because we all think differently, except for chill, modern, and classic. Oh, sorry, hi.
I have a question about the creativity piece. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, like, when your kids were younger, when you were more in that heavy lifting phase of
actually, when I did like the fake Southern accent with the friend there, I should have been like my kids who were like, no, you are not wearing that. That is so embarrassing. Or, you know, like, why can't you be the fun mom? Like, why do you have to dress like that? Or, like, so yeah, you had extra voices in your house judging you, number one, which is weird to think about. Like, they're gonna grow up and like really judge you and torture you in that way. But it really, yeah, it messed with my head in a way that I was, your modifiers do change over time, your adjectives don't. Your adjectives are always there, but your modifiers do change. And so for me, when I had kids, one of the important things for me was to not, I just didn't wanna feel like such a mom, you know, and especially living in Greenwich, I didn't wanna be like that Greenwich mom, you know, and so I was always trying to rebel against that. And so I kept leaning into things that were edgier, and I spent a ridiculous amount of money on a platinum and diamond, like literal, like sword that went through my ear. And no lie, I bought a cuff bracelet that had spikes that were so dangerous that in the Savannah airport, they would not let it go through security. And I paid an outrageous amount of money for it, but they were like, you could kill 7 pilots with this. And I had to go run and FedEx it and then like almost miss my plane. And the thing was, it would have been fine had I gone through that bracelet, this ear cuff, if I had still been wearing like a Stella pant and a Liam blazer and a t-shirt. I would have felt like in balance, and I would have been leaning into an interesting moment in time. But what happens is, because I didn't really know my core, I was mixing it with a leather pant and a Giovanni Rossi like sky high heeled shoe and like a plunging Chloe V-neck top. And so like it was like those phases where you go through and you're like, who was this person? And so yeah, that changed me. Lots of things changed me when I, you know, getting my first job, like these like suits I wore, just ridiculous. But I just didn't know how to keep my core and then fold in what I was experiencing at the time in a positive way and still retain myself. And so that's what I find interesting in our office. People are all going through different stages in their life, you know, and I think being able to lean into that and be happy with it and good about it, but still know who you are is really settling for people.
Hi Amy, so thank you for this evening and thank you for giving us this language around storytelling and the creative pragmatists. So what would be your postcard for the future, like 1 to 2 years from now?
What would be my what?
Postcard from the future.
I mean, I really, like, I love what we're doing here, and I think that I would hope that for people who are not creative pragmatists, I think it would be really cool if someone else could figure out what their language is to help those people. You know, a lot of people write to me and they're like, I love this, this, and this, and like, how can you give me advice? And I'm like, I don't know, I can't. Like, I really hope you can go do this on your own or find someone or whatever. So, you know, with what we're doing here, I really think that my goal is to just keep creating more places where interesting people can come together and have these conversations, because I find that not even just for the younger people in my office, I find that for anyone, we're in a world where, you know, for sure, statistically speaking, people are having way higher levels of anxiety, way higher levels of self-doubt, you know, it really is just so rampant. And I know that for anyone, that when you leave a place and you've really had a conversation that is just really interesting, just about interesting things. You know, you learned something from it, you heard things that didn't make you uncomfortable, but were absolutely contrary to how you think, you know, and you learned to be like, oh, that's interesting, and you learn to just have a conversation about things. Like, that is so gratifying, and I know that it is because just quick story, we were doing one of these trips, and one of our colleagues, the next day after the trip, I saw her and she was in tears and she was writing in a book, and I was like, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm really worried about you. And she was like, no, I'm so okay. I'm like more than okay. She said, I've never in my life, she said, to be part of the conversation that I was part of last night, she's like, I have never sat at a table and had a conversation with people talking about so many different things in such an interesting way, that so many different points of views were shared, and everyone just went on talking. And she said, she was like, it was so stimulating and it was so exciting, and I didn't agree with so many things, and it was so interesting to hear why I still agree with the way that I think, but it was so interesting to hear that other people can think different things and I can really disagree with it. And she's like, I want more of this. I don't want to go back to my group of friends and hear everyone just like pounding on the same ideas. She's like, I don't want that anymore in my life. I want to expand beyond this. And so that is like the best thing that I could give anyone is to do that, because I know that, like, for her, she could have gone and done, you know, deep breathing exercises and everything, but the whole idea of like feeling comfortable in a world where people are going to have different points of view and learning how to navigate through that and feel at ease is so calming. And I think that you know, we're in a place right now where it's not about, you know, this meeting in the middle necessarily. It's just like this calmness with allowing all these different voices to just be heard and be good with that, and kind of having these conversations that are starting through style and are ending up in this way is really exciting to me. And I know that it's really cool to just, you know, it'd be one thing if we were just having these conversations just in New York, but to be having the same conversation in Dubai, in Houston, in Vienna, in Milan, in Vancouver, like that's really cool. This is a really interesting group of people here, and so it makes me want more of that. And then good clothes too. Always. And good food. Yeah. Yeah?
Sure.
Do you have a question?
Oh, no. One more. I was saying if you want to take one more.
Yeah, I mean, well, is there?
If there
anything
is.
else? Cool. Thank you guys.